Hello, this is Nick Kennedy, your gray man, coming to you on St. Patrick's Day. I hope everyone's having a very enjoyable St. Patrick's Day. I'm wearing my Celtics green. So yeah, I think it's a good day to be an Irishman, I guess. Um, anyway, today I thought that I would do a review of a movie I never really planned to see. Um, I was recently in Las Vegas, and I was waiting for my wife to fly in, and I decided I was going to maybe watch a movie on pay per view. And there was a few that I would have liked to have watched. There's one called American Fiction, and I think that's probably going to be reviewed the next day or two. That was another movie I watched, only that was with my wife. So I picked up something that I thought would be kind of moderately interesting for me, and nothing should be interested in. Now, the Iron Claw, if you don't know about it, it's about a wrestling family, the Von Erichs, that came to fame in the 70s and 80s. It's a very interesting story. We'll get into that in a couple of minutes. The director is a guy that really hasn't done much. I didn't recognize a director. For me, not to know a director, that was kind of surprising. So I did actually look him up. I don't generally look things up for background. But for him, I did. And apparently, apart from a couple of TV shows, he might have done an episode here, an episode there, didn't really have any qualifications that I would think that would, do this like big budget. No, I wouldn't necessarily call it an all-star cast, but there's quite a few well-known people in here, and he did a great job. He did an outstanding job. I want to give you a little bit of a background, but first, it is starring Zac Efron. Zac Efron, I knew about him, but not really anyone that I would care to make a point of seeing. I know it's a High School Musical, and that's not really made for guys like me. Although I do love me Vanessa Hudson's, but no, I didn't see any of them. No reason to. He also had some bit parts. I guess the other movie that just comes to mind, I think, was it called 17 Again, where he was with Matthew Perry? It's one of those, I think it was called 17 Again. Anyway, whatever it was one of those movies where a parent, actually, it wasn't a parent, it was an older form of him turning young again. But it was the same thing, an older and younger, and they're swapping bodies or situations. And it was mildly interesting. I saw that a few years ago. Oh, he was in Baywatch the movie too, which I have not seen. So yeah, I mean, I recognize the name, but not anyone that I would go out of my way to see. I will say that I always thought he was a little guy, and he is kind of a little guy. I mean, I think I looked up his height's got to be maybe I don't know 5'6", 5'7", but boy, he's a big boy in this movie. He's a big boy. Reminds me of when Tom Hardy did The Dark Knight Rises, I think. And he was actually a small guy, but he bulked up. But I think Zach even looks bigger than he did. But anyway, I don't know if it was all weightlifting or good living or however he did it. We can all use our imaginations, but my God, he looked like the Hulk. Also in it is Jeremy Allen White, who we might know from The Bear. He plays, the owner, the main character. Is a good, solid performer. Playing the father, Fritz, was Holt McCallany, I guess. He's been around for quite a while. Most notable to me, he was in that great series, I think it was on Netflix, Mindhunter. And for those of you who've not seen that movie, the show, I highly recommend it. It's actually based on real life reporters that go around to prisons talking to serial killers. And like Charles Manson's in it, and Son of Sam, and a lot of the dialogue is taken right out of the real interviews. I think it's 2 seasons of it. They were planning to do a third, but from the last I heard, I don't think they're going to go through with it for a number of reasons. But it's too bad. Great series. That's where I know him from. the mother, Mara Tierney. I guess most of you will probably know her better from ER, but for me, I recognize her from News Radio, which was a really funny show back in the '90s. I thought everyone was great in that. Uh, but anyway, getting back, let me just give you a quick rundown of my history of wrestling, which is not very good. Uh, I did grow up watching it in the '70s and '80s, some of it, but not seriously. I mean, '70s just because it was on after the cartoons when I was growing up, and then in the '80s, that was when it all exploded with the rock and roll, with the Cyndi Lauper and the videos, and wrestlers became rock stars really for the most part. And the WWF, I think, was in its heyday. They were gobbling up all the little wrestling syndicate shows and making one big, huge conglomeration of it. And I would watch it on Saturday mornings, as a lark. Even though it's fake, you gotta admire the athleticism of some of these guys. And while I do know some people that actually did swear it was real, I hope they're not driving. But anyway, no, who cares about it not being real? It was good entertainment. It was funny entertainment. If you watch it like you watch, the Harlem Globetrotters, it can be very entertaining. Or it's just basically a soap opera. And it really took off at the time. The big stars were Hulk Hogan, who came off the Rocky III as Thunder Lips. That actually might have really sparked a lot of that wrestling in the early '80s popularity. And the Ultimate Warrior, he was also big. I believe he's deceased now too. A lot of these wrestlers, though, and I am not a wrestling fan. I mean, I'm not. I used to watch it in the early '80s because it was a good for a laugh. Captain Lou Albano and the rubber bands and the Iron Sheik and all that stuff. But no, I mean, I would never call myself a wrestling fan. I don't really know the techniques or all the work that goes into it. Or I'm just a schlepper who used to watch it on Saturday mornings. But I did know the characters, and I saw a couple of WrestleMania. I know those guys were not technically sound, the two that I mentioned. At least that's what I'm told. I wouldn't know, but I think I've been told that Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior were great characters, but not technically sound wrestlers. So I'll say I believe that because I really don't know myself. I think one of the guys that I heard was very, very good, who's now no longer with us, was Rick Rude. He was a big, ravishing Rick Rude was a very big heel back then. Him and Jake the Snake Roberts used to get in it over Cheryl quite a bit. And actually, he died tragically. I actually heard that he was probably the toughest wrestler that they'd ever seen. I mean, after he went wrestling, he'd take him out to the bar, and he'd normally get really drunk and beat on people. He was a true tough guy. Ask any wrestler that period, and they'll tell you Rick Rude was one guy you do not want to mess with, after hours. But I guess he died from an overdose of an anti-narcolepsy medication. Not being a druggist, I have no idea why he would take that. I would imagine something to do with maybe some drugs he was taking or steroids. I really don't know. But I was surprised to find he OD'd on an anti-narcolepsy medication. But he did. Anyway, getting back to the movie. The Iron Claw is a story among the Von Erichs. It started off with their father, who was an old-time wrestler. Now, I bring that up because the wrestlers prior to, I would say the 80s, probably in the early to mid 70s, they were much more serious in the respect that they took themselves as a very technique-oriented. They just weren't like jumping around, jumping off the top rope, which I think a lot of the wrestlers in the 80s were. They were technically sound wrestlers in every way, shape, and form, and they prided themselves on being, technically sound, really, really good, knowing the holds and all that stuff. I didn't expect much from the movie because, again, it was a wrestling movie. But to call this a wrestling movie, I think, is to undermine it. It is a story of a family, a very close family that had a lot of tragedy come into them. and they were very popular coming into the 80s. Although they, from what I understand, they were technically very good. They weren't just these guys, coming in and jumping off the top rope and doing somersaults. They were excellent, technical wrestlers. And the movie pretty much starts with them at the top of their game. They were really on the rise. And I'm not going to give many spoilers here. I'm not going to give any spoilers here. You have to see the movie. But I will say that I think it's pretty well known that the Von Erichs, for anybody who knows, wrestling, that there was a lot of tragedy in their lives, and most of it's shown in this. Surprisingly enough, Sean Von Erich also had a tragic story, and he's not even mentioned in the movie. And they actually asked the director, why did you leave him out? I mean, you talking about all the tragedy of the Von Erichs. Why would you leave that out? That story was pretty important. And he more or less said, I'm doing a 2-hour movie. Actually, it's a little over 2 hours. I think it's like 2 hours and 6 minutes. And he's like, something had to give. I mean, he said he goes to do another movie about that. And there was just so much to squeeze in 2 hours. I had to make an artistic call and decide that we'd have to leave one of the tragedies out. But there's plenty of tragedy in this movie, and to find out also that there's even additional tragedies that they didn't have time to put in. Wow, that's just mind blowing. They say they were cursed. Were they cursed? I don't know. I mean, I do believe someone in curses, but you could also really, you could dismiss it as maybe just their lifestyles, beating on their bodies, taking drugs, Fast and Furious. I mean, they weren't exactly tame people. So who knows? But that's kind of the theme, is that they just feel like, they're very, very cursed. I will say that, as I mentioned before, this is way more than a wrestling movie. It's a human story about, determination, motivation, controlling parents, maybe, or maybe even controlling or maybe even absent parents in some regards. It's a story about brothers and how they can band together. It's got a lot of things in it. Now, my wife, who knows nothing about wrestling because she's from Nigeria, she was reluctant because I told her after when she got there, she's like, you gotta watch this movie again with me. I'll watch it again. And I did. And I kind of had to force her to. And at the end, she was just blown away. So anyway, I don't want to give any of the plot away. I just want to tell you that I was very pleasantly surprised. It's a full-fledged story of human life and tragedy, as I mentioned numerous times. And if I were you, I definitely would make a point of seeing this. I'm going to give it, out of 10, I'll give it about an 8.2, I guess. One other note too, by the way, that I found out is the Iron Claw was actually a wrestling move that was originated by the father. And I guess the sons used it as well. The technique is basically just squashing a face. I mean, you're just getting these big hands and stick over someone's face and you squeeze really hard. Whether it hurt in the ring, it depends how hard they squeeze. But that was their signature move, was the Iron Claw, and that's the name of the movie. There was also an appearance by an actor who did a very good imitation of Ric Flair, for those of you who remember Ric Flair. So all in all, I think this is a good movie. I'm not so sure I'd want my children to see it, unless they were probably, maybe 15 or 16. I certainly don't think this is a movie for, 12-year-olds, but that's your call. But anyway, that's it for now. And I will be following this up with, like I said, American Fiction was another movie I saw that certainly is worth discussing. And that's it for now. I hope all you guys have a very happy St. Patrick's Day. If you liked this, please like, share, and subscribe. If any comments, let me know below, and I will talk to you later. Hope it was good for you too. This is your Nick Kennedy signing off.